Merry Christmas, everyone. It is time for the BC Poly Hot Stove, and I am literally in front of a Christmas fire, which makes me wonder, Maclean K, why do we not have a little picture of a hot stove behind me all the time?
Well, you know what? I do like the angle of you sort of literally being on fire. It's good.
Get ready
It's
for some hot takes, people. I am loaded
yes.
for bear. Today, we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about Daryl Pleckus, Speaker Mania, until someone comes up with a better one.
It just keeps on coming and coming and coming and coming. Let's just start with that.
Yes.
So obviously on Thursday.
Well, we should introduce ourselves. I'm Jordan
right.
Damon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, and you are Maclean K, Editor-in-Chief
of the Mighty Orca.
By the way, great
Here.
redesign today. It looks fantastic.
Yes, actually, yeah, let's start with that. The Orca had a little site refresh this morning, a little more, I think more than anything else, it's more searchable. And you know what? It's prettier.
Yes, well, if you want to see all of my weird rants about various municipalities, now I am easier to search than ever, theorca.ca. Okay, let's talk about Speakergate, or I was thinking about this today. If Pleckus actually has to resign, Zussman and Shaw's next book, Matter of Gone-fidence.
Oh, not bad.
Take that,
not
Lisa.
Bad.
I'm going to
You're
name
not
the
the
next
only
book.
one submitting ideas for their next book title, but
Yes.
I have to think they'll write this one. This one just keeps getting stranger and stranger. Thursday, the Legislative Management Committee, known as LAMC, met. Now, normally, this committee meets a couple times a year. It's in camera, which means there's no media, and there's not even Hansard recordings. And they usually just rubber stamp the finances of the legislature. We need $80 million to pay all the legislature's bills. That's everything from human resources to pensions to, stocking the food here at the legislative dining room, everything. And this year, a little different. Not only was it not in camera, they allowed media to be in the room. And I mean, you can read the transcript. You can watch it on Hansard. That would probably do a better job describing it than anything I could tell you here. Daryl Pleckus has essentially staked his entire career on audits that are not yet happening of the legislature, saying that if it does not, quote, make taxpayers throw up, he will resign.
Puke
Now,
gate. Here we go.
yeah. So, I mean, if I literally don't vomit, then the speaker has to go. It's it's one of those things where you had to be in the room to see everything that was happening, from Rich Coleman apparently chuckling every time Pleckus lost his temper, which was frequently, to the nervous tick that NDP House Leader Mike Farnworth is developing with every passing day, because their entire government depends on whatever you think of what the investigations may turn up, but the speaker looks increasingly unstable.
Yeah, well, let's recap. Let's go person by person. So let's start with Mary Polak, because I've known Mary a long time. I had no idea she could be such a prosecutor. We talk about Andrew Wilkinson, the former lawyer. Oh my God, Mary, you missed your calling.
I think even those who think the Liberals are playing partisan games, or which is what the NDP are saying, they have been impressed by.
And the NDP certainly aren't playing any partisan games here. It's certainly not.
Well, that's what's made this whole thing even crazier. I mean, everything depends on Daryl Pleckus, because, I mean, the government could literally fall if he decides to resign or goes rogue. So, I mean, the stakes are just impossibly high in this. But throughout it all, Mary Polak, at least publicly, has been very steady, very even hand. She never loses her temper, and that's in marked contrast to Daryl Pleckus, who, again, whatever you think of his position, has at the very least been, let's say, mercurial in his temperament.
Yes, Mary Polak, of course, a single mom, raised a teenage daughter, well used to intransigence and mood swings. So, although her daughter's lovely, I shouldn't say that. But in general, take it from someone who has a 15-year-old at home. It can go back and forth. They love you and then they don't, and then they love you again. So that was Mary's place. Now, I found Rob Shaw's coverage of Mike Farnworth pretty funny. I could just see Farnworth screwing his face. Now, of course, Farney is the one who worked Pleckus so hard and actually recruited him in the first place, which then allowed John Horgan to credibly claim he had the support of the House, because he had a speaker willing to essentially cross the floor to help him. Farney, by all accounts, would have rather been anywhere else on earth than right there.
Well, I mean, you're right. He created Speaker Darryl Plecas, and Rob. You mentioned Rob Shaw. He had an interesting piece last week saying that normally the Speaker is obviously a member of the governing party, and while they're not a member of caucus, they're still kept in the loop. They know what's going on. They have regular meetings, usually with the government House Leader, and sometimes even the Premier and the Premier's staff, because they're still a member of the party and have to win re-election and all that kind of thing. Mike Farnworth has apparently done none of that with Darryl Plecas, and whether it be Farnworth or someone else, the point is no one from the NDP talks to Darryl Plecas, which is odd because they absolutely need him. And so the Liberals don't want anything to do with Darryl Plecas because, he betrayed them. The Greens, as the third party in the House, it's not their place to keep Darryl Plecas up to date, and so fair enough. And so the government, which again, absolutely requires this man to be there and be stable, has sort of left him fester. And so you can see how Farnworth would not only not want to be there, but I think there's sort of a growing awareness that this is a problem that could have been nipped in the bud months ago, even just by checking in with the man every couple of weeks.
Yeah. In the crowd was one Wallace Opal, QC, Stone Wally, as he was once known, once belovedly called by the NDP, who now have hired the man, apparently, to provide some advice to the Speaker, which the Speaker seems reluctant to take. That's two advisors. Do we know, was Brent Mullen in the room as well?
Alan Mullen. No, he was not this time.
No.
But both, I can tell you, both Darryl Plecas and Alan Mullen were in the Speaker's Christmas party here in the legislature, where he spoke at length to one and all. And I missed this particular part, but he told Canadian Press's Dirk Meissner that, does he look worried? And, we're all, there's stuff coming. There's big stuff coming.
Big stuff coming. Well, look, there was an audit in 2011-ish. John Doyle did it. He ripped the legislature to shreds. I was with the Taxpayers Federation. It was like manna from heaven for us. But that did prompt a number of changes brought in by Craig James and the Sergeant of Arms, who did a lot, put in a lot of changes. And really, the shocking thing to me is like one of the financial oversight pieces is the Auditor General herself. Carol Bellinger actually sits on a committee and looks at this stuff. Not once a year like every other government agency, but I'm told like at least quarterly, maybe monthly, she's involved in the oversight of this because it is sort of exempt from the politics of it all. So I don't know. Will she be puking? And if she starts puking, should she be turfed? I mean, how does the Auditor General miss such rampant fiscal mismanagement then?
Well, it would have to be some unbelievably elaborate and criminal mastermind level scheme.
Like Littlefinger and Game of Thrones.
There are two special prosecutors working on this, but I mean, for that many people to have missed it, and for those two men to risk very lucrative careers, they're either thrill seekers or criminal masterminds on the level of Ocean's 11, and I don't see either of those. I just don't.
Littlefinger. It's Littlefinger and Varys. Chaos is a ladder, Maclean. All right, anything else on what you've referred to as l'affaire Plecas?
I have, mostly because I love saying l'affaire, but no, and I think that we probably won't hear more until Christmas at this point, only because everyone's sort of, returning to their homes for the holidays and, short of there being another eruption, which is not impossible in this situation. Nope. We probably won't hear much more until everyone starts coming back here in January. That is a wild swing of a guess on my part, but I think this actually will calm down for a couple of weeks.
If I were the NDP, I'd be passing the hat to send Mr. Plecas on a month-long vacation to, I don't know, somewhere without internet.
If I was the NDP, I would be taking advantage of the legislation they introduced and run a dummy no hope recall campaign.
Oh, no. So we should talk about this briefly. There is a group in Abbotsford, a legitimate group. I've actually chatted with one of the key organizers. They have a couple of hundred canvassers ready to go. Looking to recall Darryl Plecas, but they are petrified of this, EB, whatever.
False flag operation.
Yeah, a false flag operation. One would hope Elections BC would actually test these things before they certify them, but Elections BC just did go along with a rigged referendum process laid out by the government, so maybe they wouldn't. But this is one of the big concerns because, my point to them was just purely talking politics, right? Like, listen, look outside the window today. Do you really want to send canvassers out in the rain in this kind of weather? Sun sets at 4:30. No one wants to open their doors. Like, this is a tough time to be collecting 40% of a riding's signatures. Maybe May, maybe June, a little bit more, people are outside. There's a few little festivals in Abbotsford where you can pick up, a few thousand signatures at once. But they are terrified of the false flag recall, and who can blame them?
Well, it's a cynical ploy at best from the government, and from an an attorney general who might have thought there'd be a recall campaign in his own riding. But I didn't see a need for this legislation.
No, I didn't either. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. All right, my on the front burner issue is the labor code. So classic NDP, right? So they strike an independent panel to review the labor code. Look, the labor code's kind of swung back and forth. In the 90s, it swung very heavily to the union, favoring the union side, not surprising because there was a activist union NDP government in place. In 2003, it came back the other way. The unions would say too far to the business side. We say not far enough. But anyways, it came back the other way. And it's sort of over the last 15 years, very little had been done on the labor code. It sort of settled into where it needed to be, and both sides had started living with the reality of it. Well, lo and behold, new government. And of course, the NDP are busy, you can't say this, Maclean, but I can, paying off political debts to the unions who put them into power. And so they are busy. They want to shred the labor code and skew it very much to the big union side. So they strike an independent panel. The independent panel comes back with something like 30 recommendations of changes to the labor code, almost every single one of them favoring the union, except for one that they didn't get quite the way that Harry Baines and the NDP wanted. They voted 2-1, this little panel, to not take away the secret ballot, the democratic right of unionized voters to vote with a secret ballot. What the unions want is a show of hands or signing a card so they can kind of bully and see who's voting for a union and who's voting against a union. This is for certification votes, also to change unions and decertification. But, business and most workers, and in fact, most British Columbians, according to the polling we've seen for the ORCA, want to keep the secret ballot as a fundamental right. So, not good enough for the NDP. Instead of just taking these things, they've now ordered another round of consultation. Maclean, you'll be shocked to know that business groups aren't being asked for their opinion on this.
What?
I know. This extra consultation seems to be purely from the labor side. We have submitted something from ICBA and had 12 other associations sign on with it, large ones, including, I believe, the BC Chamber of Commerce, representing hundreds of thousands of workers. But we've put that in, recommending keep the secret ballot, and then a few tweaks. Look, honestly, a few of the things in there, recommendations we could probably live with. It's the totality of all of them that skew it really to the labor side. So we're waiting. Harry Baines, I guess, maybe January, maybe February, will come forward with legislation. We would be shocked if they did not include the secret ballot, moving away from the secret ballot, because that is like NDP dogma, certainly union dogma, and they need to pay that favor back. But there has been one man, Maclean, one man in British Columbia who has told me time and time again he has been standing up for the rights of the workers to that secret ballot. He has been stemming the tide of the red union labor crazy orange wave rabid take away the workers' rights and force them to be bandied about by union bosses. Andrew Weaver has stood up for the secret ballot time and time again. Of course, we've seen nothing but statements about Andrew Weaver saying he stood up for it time and time again. But here we go. You've met with the great man. Apparently he wants a new governing agreement because he got taken to the cleaners in the old one. That's my opinion, not his. Is he going to negotiate away the secret ballot in order to get something else out of the NDP?
Well, you're right. I did meet with Andrew Weaver yesterday for our year-ender interview. You can look forward to that piece on the ORCA in the extremely near future. And I think the most fair thing to do here, I went back this morning and I transcribed this portion of our interview. And I just want to read Mr. Weaver's response when we brought up the secret ballot. It has come up behind the scenes. I have been pretty public that I don't support a blanket card check. I am open to discussing that building trades are different from office trades. He made a presentation to a union recently, I believe it was CMA, that when you have a fixed location, there is no excuse to not have a secret ballot. But when you have something like crane operators on a building site and that site changes in 6 weeks, those are discussions we could have. Different work environments, and if you're not attached to a site, you could argue that it could be more difficult. But I still believe fundamentally in a secret ballot, and we have come out 100% in support of the review panel and their recommendations. And he did say also that he met with the review panel because that was a dissenting opinion from the government, and wondering why they didn't explore, you'll find this interesting, an Ontario hybrid model where building trades have some form of card certification, and what he was told was that simply wasn't brought to them by the BC Federation of Labour or any of the stakeholders. So a bit of a mixed bag there. He's willing to talk about it, and he seems to think that building trades might be different in some respects in terms of not needing or deserving a secret ballot.
So Andrew Weaver says, let me get this straight. All workers are created equal. Just some are more equal than others because they get the democratic right to a secret ballot, but other ones don't. Like Andrew Weaver, no offense, has not done a day of work on a construction site in his life, does not understand this industry at all, called them temporary jobs, actually very much offended construction workers during the Site C debate. And here we go, drinking the bathwater of the unions and the NDP. Yeah, that is... there is absolutely no reason why, on the very rare moment where there is a certification vote, there is absolutely no reason why you cannot get those workers into one place. It's never been a problem anywhere in British Columbia for the last 15 years. Yeah, that's disgusting.
Well, I mean, when you talk to people who aren't involved in this directly, whether they're on either side of the argument, I mean, you find open mouth surprise that something as fundamental as a secret ballot is even considered something that we wouldn't have. This is something we've taken for granted, and rightfully so. So the fact that we might move backwards here, I think, to the average British Columbian, well, and again, polls have borne this out, is just appalling. And I want to be fair to Weaver, because he did say that he is 100% in support of the review panel, and that he is, I'm going to find it here, he is absolutely, he does not support blanket card check, and he believes in a secret ballot. So yes, there's wiggle room there. And it's disappointing because he had been sort of ironclad on that in the past.
He believes in stopping Site C, and Site C is being built, thank God. He believes in he believes in Uber, but votes down the Liberals' plan to have it in place on Valentine's Day.
You make fair points.
This guy, we're going to come to prop rep in a second here, but, this guy is the poster child for why proportional representation should be soundly defeated. I mean, it's just unbelievable how... I guess we should expect it from a guy who came out flat out and said election platforms don't matter once you form government. Once there's but I mean, forgive me if my eyes roll out of my head.
Is that his supporters certainly don't support card check. His supporters do not belong to public sector unions, and so I'm hoping that there are people in his party who are saying, Andrew, no. This is one issue that we have to be rock solid on, because this is not something that, I mean, there's a BC Chamber of Commerce poll that's going to come out shortly again on the Orca that says 75% of British of business owners are 100% opposed to this. And I can't remember the number on our own poll, but it's an overwhelming number of British Columbians opposed to 80% card check opposed to it. So I am hoping that there are some political strategists in his party saying, no, you can talk all you want, but the answer has to be no.
I believe a green strategist is a complete oxymoron. Listen,
against hope.
Yeah, these guys, it's unreal that they would, that he would bluster on this for so long and then trade it away. It's hard for me. It's hard for me. It's hard for me.
He would feel he needs to. I mean, he told Shane Woodford. He did not tell me this, that he wants to renegotiate the confidence and supply agreement. I'm like, well, why? And what are you going to get a better deal? And is this your bargaining chip? But I don't. Weaver needs wins to give to his supporters, because you're right to mention Site C and LNG, and I brought up that with him as well. So I don't think that giving the NDP something else they want that Andrew Weaver supporters don't want helps him in any way, shape, or form. Again, I might be thinking too rationally here.
Yeah, look, Weaver, you don't have to give these guys anything except support for keeping Horgan in the Premier's office. You don't have to give them anything else other than that. That's all you have to give them, because they are so desperate they'll cling to power on any term you put forward, because polling has shown that everyone's in the margin of error. So they are not going to risk going to the polls on this. You do not have to give them anything. By the way, I have a theory on this, on the Woodford-Casa scoop, which was a great scoop. But here's my theory. You ready? I think Weaver started early in the morning with interviews, because he got interviewed by you and Shaw and Zussman and a bunch of other folks. And I think you scalawags in the media, you just kept harping that he got nothing on that deal, and that the deal wasn't great for the Greens, and he got nothing, and over again. And by the time he got to Woodford, he was like, you know what? These media reporters, he's in the cesspool in Victoria. Right, I didn't get anything, and now I want to renegotiate the deal. That's my theory on that. Policy on the fly.
Well, if I read Shane Woodford's story and Twitter account, it's that Weaver kind of threw that in at the end as almost as a by the way, when they were just sort of chatting afterwards. So, I mean, he may not even have sort of meant it in a serious way. Weaver does enjoy talking, let's put it that way. So I could see that being a trial balloon that he's decided to float, and it's in no way official policy. That is not impossible, is all I'm saying.
Yes, I will be reviving the Leave It to Weaver video shortly, I'm sure, for ICBA. All right, the back burner prop rep, the voting is done. We know that 41% or so of British Columbians returned ballots. I suspect there'll be a number of spoiled ballots, so the actual turnout will probably hit right around 40%. Neither side has any confidence that they've won. Neither side has any confidence that they've lost. All the polling shows it was within the margin of error. There was a slight uptick at the end of ballots, but not that large an uptick. And the theory was that maybe more prop reppers would turn out near the end. Do we have a timeline, first of all, for the count on this? And what do we think, do we want to make a bet, you and I, where we think it's gone?
Well,
a prediction?
In terms of a timeline for the count, Elections BC has kind of held their cards close to the vest. I mean, I think what they basically said is it's going to take as long as it's going to take. And it'll be like an NFL replay. I mean, it's have to get it right. So, and that's fair enough. But the problem is this means we could well be getting these results the week of Christmas, which nobody wants that. I think that everyone you talk to says this is going to be close. We were just talking about Andrew Weaver. His prediction was 52-48 for yes. I think the margin is probably correct, but I think it's the other way. I think it's something like 53-54 no, and side yes. 54
would be a landslide in this thing.
Yeah, I think the furthest apart I have seen any prediction was 55-45, and I mean a 10-point swing is just not going to be. Yeah. That's not going to happen here.
I can talk myself into either side winning on this, which is interesting. The number I'm looking forward to is how many people voted on the first question but not the second.
Yeah. That will be very interesting.
That's a real test.
I think it'll be a substantial portion of the no vote. Maybe as high as a third to half, which creates legitimacy problems. If it's a narrow yes win, which even the yes side says is kind of their best case scenario. So let's say it's half of 40% voted yes. Yeah. Well, a substantial portion of those who voted no will not have picked one of the three proportional representation systems, and even those who voted yes, there'll be a mix. And so, I mean, the nightmare scenario is that not only are we going to get proportional representation, but we'll get a system that was picked by literally, 10% or less of British Columbians, and there are some serious legitimacy concerns there.
Yeah, I haven't talked to anyone from BC Liberal headquarters on this, but that difference in vote between the first question and second question will be a bit of a test for their effectiveness, because they were very vocal as to
one and done.
One and done. Don't vote on that second one, which I appreciated because I didn't want to vote on the second one. So,
Well, and just clarifying for those voters who didn't know that they might have thought it was mandatory. So it was good. It was useful at least to tell people that no, you do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be it'll be interesting to see. So we will see those results hopefully before Christmas, and that honestly, like, I'm trying to put together a bit of a plan for next year as far as some of our advocacy work here. A lot of it depends on whether or not Prop Rep passes, because obviously ICBA has a court case in place. I don't think it's unfair to say that we very likely drop that case if Prop Rep went down to defeat. I mean, we're not the government. We don't have millions of dollars to spend on arguing democratic principles in front of a bunch of judges. We prefer not to do that. But, if it does pass, we think there's enough flaws and charter violations within the whole process that, we think there's a compelling case. And that will make for a very interesting January for us at ICBA. So.
One that I hope does not happen. I hope your January is boring.
And me too. That would be great. All right. So also on the back burner, but not really on the back burner, Nanaimo.
Yeah, I mean, the mother of all by-elections, as we've been calling it on the Fin. Subscribe now at theorca.ca. It's not officially on, but I mean, it's on. If I'm getting campaign material from both Tony Harris, the BC Liberal candidate, and Sheila Malcolmson, forgive me, the NDP candidate, who is also the MP for the area. I believe the Greens are still having a nomination contest. So I mean, the Liberal side especially has been incredibly active. Apparently, Tony Harris is out door knocking literally every day. I mean, make no mistake, Nanaimo has been extremely tough sledding for the BC Liberals since 2001, but there is an air of optimism coming from that side.
Yeah, you know what? Well, they landed. He may be the best possible candidate, short of Krog himself, right? Like, he just seems, his family seems universally respected in the community.
Yeah, including by Leonard Krog himself. They like each other. Yeah,
people seem to know him. I think from the Liberals' point of view, my suspicion is they don't even have to win for the media to deem it a success. If he can close it to within 5 or 6 points in Nanaimo of all places, the media will say, yeah, they lost, but they really did win. Mm-hmm. I found it interesting. Some of these Liberal MLAs who have gone across to door knock. I saw Greg Kylo, Twitter was there on the weekend. Jane Thornthwaite's been there, and. Look, anytime a politician tweets about door knocking and, great response to the doors, great, I'm always skeptical. These guys genuinely seemed surprised at the great response they were getting at the doors. It didn't seem like the usual, I'm out door knocking and everyone loves me bluster. It seemed like, they were very energized by what they were seeing there on the ground.
Well, imagine you're John Horgan and you didn't put Leonard Krog in cabinet. Okay, you made that decision. You have to live with it. He decides he's going to run for mayor, and the timing is such that the by-election is going to happen just as Nanaimo, the city, has to figure out how to pay for the employer health tax, and is also fighting the speculation tax, which they didn't want applied to their city. So there's a lot of sort of bad news that caused from the Premier's office and the NDP government that even loyal NDP voters might be sort of saying,
yeah. Well, look at Krog.
Not happy about that.
Look at Krog. He puts his hand up for this employer health tax in February, and then again in the fall sitting. And then, now he's the mayor of Nanaimo, and he's going to have to pass on a 1.5% property tax increase to pay for that. If I were him, I'd just blame it all on Carol James. But
he should.
Yeah, it was the truth.
He'll have good company.
You'll have good company. All right. Politicians or leaders who are having good weeks. Who's heating up? All right. This one, well, actually, we're talking employer health tax. You go first because it's a nice segue.
Yeah, I mean, this will surprise many of our listeners, but I'm actually going to go with our Premier, John Horgan, because last week, I think it was last week, I had a chance to ask him about this exact issue, about the employer health tax, and the legion of mayors from regions as small as Lanceville and as big as Vancouver saying, yep, they're going to have to raise property taxes because of the employer health tax. When I asked the finance minister, Carol James, I got a pretty flat denial. Nope, they might be raising their property taxes, but they're wrong. The EHT is not the reason why. Coming out ahead. And even if they did pass on the extra cost to taxpayers, it's literally something like $15 to $25 per property owner, which is ridiculous. But that's what she said. When I asked the Premier, I got a very different answer. I got, that's a good point. And we won't make these decisions now because it's mid-year. It was the quarterly update, to be fair. But with a $1.4 billion surplus and the municipalities forced to raise property taxes because you're literally downloading costs, which he used to criticize the previous government for doing, maybe they would have to look at changing the way they do things in February with the budget. So, I mean, whether they do anything or not, it will be the important thing. But the simple fact that he admitted something that his finance minister and, in fact, his entire government had not yet been willing to even countenance, I will give him credit for that.
Well, there you go. You're a much more gracious human than I am with this guy. Look, $1.4 billion, that's almost exactly what they need to raise through this employer health tax to cover off that second half of the MSP. So, pretty easy to connect the dots there, although I would point out they have raised taxes $5.5 billion as well. So,
yep. 19 new or increased taxes since they joined, assumed office.
Yeah. But they're wonderful fiscal managers, says Gary Mason from the Globe and Mail. Frick, give me a break.
Well, I mean, this was the Saskatchewan NDP formula for years, right? I mean, you can balance a budget temporarily if you don't have to worry about long-term planning and economic health. But I mean, you can always just raise taxes to the point where your next year's budget is balanced. And there are those who will give you credit for that. It's like paying off your electric bill with your credit card. Yes, your electric bill's paid. Good for you. Was it a long-term wise decision? No. But I mean, this was the Roy Romano formula for years.
Oh, are you telling me this could all lead to a 3-term Brad Wall-like government here in BC? Please, Maclean, say so. Brad, move to Victoria. Save us. Actually, don't move to Victoria. No reasonable human can be elected there. Move to Kamloops.
I mean, the NDP is not polling well provincially. I mean, or federally, I should say. And I think as the pocketbook issues come home to roost, the current government's honeymoon, which I would argue has already come to an end, will come to a screeching halt.
Yeah, they're polling so bad. Actually, I saw a pre-roll YouTube ad by the steelworkers trying to prop up Jagmeet Singh. So, because of course our office is in Burnaby, so no doubt it's just coincidental it happened to be here.
And another NDP MP is not running, Finn Donnelly. So, I mean, man, what are they polling at? 11% nationally? That's wow.
Yeah, Elizabeth May actually pip them at the post. Okay, my hot is the war on Christmas, folks. And this bothers me because there's nothing I find more tedious in my Facebook and Twitter streams than the people who are always claiming that someone's trying to take the Christ out of Christmas, or, Xmas is the end of humanity. There's a hilarious 30 Rock line, Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, and you open the card, is what terrorists say. We say Merry Christmas. I tire of the war on Christmas. Like the people who claim there's a war on Christmas, and then you get an idiot like Ben Isett. Is it just me, or is Ben
Isett
driving me crazy? So Ben Isett, a Victoria City Councillor, comes out and essentially says, "Well, we need to have a staff review of our Christmas decorating. Are these snowflakes too Christian? This poinsettia on my desk is a Christian symbol. I gotta tell you, I grew up in a church, Maclean. I never saw poinsettia or any kind of claim that was somehow linked to the Christian version of Christmas." You live there. Are things so perfect in Victoria that this is the number one issue that the council should be dealing with? Have you gotten everything all under control that now, Ben Isaac's war, has to prompt a war on the war on Christmas defenders?
I mean, as a Victoria resident, it's just embarrassing. And as somebody pointed out to me today, those poinsettias, which I agree with you are in no way mentioned in the Bible, those poinsettias that so offended Ben Isett, and that was apparently his trigger point, and I'm using the word trigger very intentionally. Those poinsettias are raised on city-owned parks land by CUPE staff and placed there by CUPE staff. It is a 100% union operation because this is the city of Gardens, and many of them are city owned, and they're all run by union staff.
So questions about this: do the CUPE staff, pray over the poinsettias before they pluck them? Do they anoint them with oil in any way in a Pentecostal forum before they do this kind of, or is it just they take them, they put them on the counselor's desk because, hey, it's Christmas and why not add a little bit of color to the otherwise dreary chamber of Lisa Helps?
I mean, I saw a quick remark from the mayor this morning saying, "Yeah, this is probably we don't need to be going down this route." And
this from the mayor who refuses in the city of Victoria
yeah.
to swear an oath to the Queen, who pulled down the statue of Sir John A.
Yeah.
Macdonald like it was Saddam Hussein.
So if you've lost Lisa Helps on this issue, you've lost everyone. I mean, the reaction across the board here seems to be sort of a quiet revulsion, which is as much as we ever managed to do in Victoria. But look, I mean, if you've never come here, the city depends on tourism and things like retail and downtown, and the city actually does a wonderful job lighting up for the Christmas. It's beautiful in Victoria. We always said when we moved here that Victoria does Christmas very well. So I mean, this is a direct assault on how Victoria not only sees itself, but I mean earns a living.
Yes, yes. So feel free. I give you free reign, War on Christmas activists. Go on, attack Ben Isaac. That's fine. You've won the war. They won the battle on Baby It's Cold Outside. That seems to be popping back up on playlists now. Now, Ben Isaac, that'll entertain people for a few days, and I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, we did Who's Hot. Who is cold in politics? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Someone who I actually really like, who I think is a genuinely good human being, has somehow, I think she's fallen and bumped her head. She's decided to run for office. Tamara Taggart, the former CTV evening news host, great philanthropist, does a lot of charity work around town, like an amazing woman, doing great things. For some reason, though, she's seeking the federal Liberal nomination in Vancouver Kingsway, which might be one of the worst ridings to try in Vancouver. Just to give you a little bit of context, it's been held by Don Davies of the NDP for 10 years. He seems to be one of the few NDP MPs who's decided to run again, or certainly hasn't said he's not running again. He beat David Emerson back in 2008. He won last time by 15,000 votes. And this demographically, this is a riding where more than 50% of the voters are from Filipino or Chinese descent. There's another 15 or 20% as well who are from South Asian countries. I'm not sure how much CTV evening news these folks were watching 3 or 4 years ago to be able to have Tamara seize that advantage of name recognition. This just seems to me like, I don't know, you saw Steve Darling run, who's also another amazingly nice human being and now a Port Moody councillor, but these news anchors running for office doesn't usually end up very well.
No, and I mean, you mentioned all the work that Tamara Taggart's done in Vancouver. I mean, the phrase "pillar of the community" gets thrown around a lot, but I mean that she actually is that. And if I'm Justin Trudeau or Gerald Butts or whoever's making these decisions, I would say that Tamara Taggart is legitimately a star candidate. So why are you putting her in a riding that is as close to unwinnable as you're going to find in Vancouver? I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, it's an unfair deal. Funny story about Tamara. Back in the day when she was still on, I think it was Z95 radio station. No, she was doing weather for CTV. I think she hadn't moved into the news anchor role yet. Z95 has a big contest for a couple, and basically they let the listeners plan a wedding for this couple, and the payoff was you get a honeymoon in Hawaii. But, the listeners who are terrible human beings would plan your wedding. And of course, it was in a bowling alley. The bride came in by garbage truck. The groom had to come in, cuffed by Burnaby RCMP officers and get dropped off. Easy. I saw you nod there. Significant others might watch this podcast.
I mean, if you're agreeing to this wedding, you probably deserve to be cuffed.
Yeah, you got married. Tamara did the wedding, although as an officiant, I really did the wedding kind of quietly afterwards and had them sign papers and whatnot. But really nice couple. Tamara was fantastic. We had a good time. Lots of laughs. But that will be my enduring memory of Tamara Taggart, was her and I standing together, watching proudly as the bride got off the back of the garbage truck and came to the bowling alley to get hitched.
That is a good story. That is going to be hard to top my cold.
Yes, your cold. Your cold is actually very reasonable.
Well, yes, and it's not any one person. This is a general trend that I'm noticing. It's that the thing that I think is getting colder and colder and colder are those who think that First Nations are monolithically opposed to all development, all things that are built are bad according to First Nations. That is a narrative that I think, unfortunately, too many people bought into for too long, and I think even too many people in the media sort of enabled it. The people like Stuart Phillips stand up and be like, well, he's spoken. First, we know what First Nations people think. That's not true, obviously. I mean, there's as much diversity of opinion in First Nations as there are among any other group of people. And every time we look, especially in the last couple of weeks, we see another story which contradicts this. Squamish Nation voted in favor of wood fiber LNG and the very lucrative benefits agreement that's going to go along with it. There's another LNG project proposed near Port Alberni named Quispa LNG, which is significant First Nations involvement. There's the growing voice of groups like the First Nations LNG Alliance and the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. I mean, there is an increasing sense that that First Nations they might not agree on specific projects, local projects for them, but they're not necessarily opposed to creating opportunity and jobs because they're just like the rest of us, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. In fact, there's several of these First Nations groups have banded together. They're trying to fight Justin Trudeau's oil tanker ban off the north coast because there's no evidence is necessary. It was basically just done to placate the Northern Gateway opponents. They have the Eagle Spirit pipeline that they're wanting to build that is completely First Nations owned. It really is. You're right. It's really interesting to see. It used to be like you had to struggle to find someone to speak out on behalf of First Nations for these projects, and it always ended up being Ernie Cray or someone like that out of Cheam. But now you're seeing more and more of these First Nations find their voices. I think it's a testament to also a transfer of power to younger leadership who see this as a way to develop their communities economically, to break the cycle of poverty in their communities, and to actually do something meaningful for their generations and the ones beyond. So it is very exciting to see that. And I think Ernie Cray used to call the eco-activists who would co-opt them greenwashers, or that their concerns weren't necessarily being represented by the Greenpeaces, the Lead Nows of the world.
Well, I mean, that's it exactly. I mean, you talk to a guy like Ellis Ross, and I mean, that's the scenario you described is essentially his life story. Growing up essentially in poverty with very few opportunities and just saying, I don't want to live on handouts my whole life, and I certainly don't want my kids to. I want there to be choice. I want there to be opportunity. And that doesn't mean you say yes to everything that comes along. But again, that's true of all of us. Yeah. It's but a blanket no is probably the worst possible position to have. Yeah,
no, I agree. All right, well, at the Orca BC on Twitter, Facebook.com/the Orca BC, bit.ly/the Orca TV if you want to skip right to the YouTube channel. We got a great interview up with Ryan Berlin from Rennie on Vancouver housing. Rick Clough sat down with him, and it was really interesting. I think that Ryan Berlin's a guy that we need to hear more of in this housing debate in Vancouver. So check that out on the Orca. Check out my piece, in which I blame the NDP for all every municipal tax increase in the province. Not quite true, but close enough. And I give, if you're a municipal councillor out there and you want to pass the buck, I give you an excellent suggestion on how in my piece.
He does indeed.
Yes, and watch for Maclean's pieces, the interview with Andrew Weaver. You have an interview with Andrew Wilkinson this afternoon.
In a couple hours, that's right, yeah.
In a couple hours. What about the Premier? Is he still ducking you?
He is, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Yes. Well, they claim that there's no room at the inn. That's a story I've heard around this season before. That's all right. That's all right. We plan to be here next year, and we'll have even more difficult questions. And we're not going anywhere, Premier.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for watching. We will be back next week. Well, I guess we'll do like a year-end thing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that what you do?
We can do a naughty and nice list.
That's right. Perfect. Excellent. All right. We'll be back for that. Thanks for watching, everyone.